Welcome to today's episode. We are joined by someone who is one of the leading voices for churches and organizations who want to rethink the alleviation of poverty. His organization trains thousands of people across the globe by offering them a better framework for poverty alleviation. We're excited to have a conversation with author Brian Fikkert. He is the founder of the Chalmers Center for Economic Development and professor of economics and community development at Covenant College. Dr. Fikkert holds a Ph.D. in economics from Yale University. Brian, welcome. It's great to have you. I'm honored.
It's so great to be with you today, brother.
I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. And before we jump into talking about when helping hurts and your other books that you've written, I've seen a number of podcasts that you've done. You talk a lot about that, and we'll dive into that. But I want to learn a little bit about you, Brian. And where does the passion come from? Just talk to me a little bit about it.
Yeah. So I'm from rural Wisconsin. My dad was a pastor of a small church in a very rural part of Wisconsin. And the truth of the matter is, I don't really know where this came from. But from a very young age, I felt God was calling me to work amongst people who were poor. And I don't really know where that came from, but it's been a lifelong passion. And so for me, life has just been about trying to figure out how could I use the gifts and abilities that I have to minister to people in poverty. And I had a little bit of a problem because I was really good at math. And so when I went to college, I was like, what am I going to do here? I like math. I want to help poor people. I don't get the connection. And I discovered the field of economics, which uses a lot of math. Yep. And discovered that economists often think about issues of poverty. And so I went off and pursued a career in economics. And now a lot of my work is actually explaining what's wrong with the field of economics. But for me, this is just a lifelong passion that God has led me on to try to serve the poor using the talents and abilities that I have.
Packers fan?
Now we're talking dirty. Yes. I grew up an hour and a half south of Green Bay, and they are my life's passion. Yeah,
I can imagine. So being in Chattanooga, you don't lose that. I grew up in Buffalo, New York, so I'm Buffalo Bills fan through and through.
You've been through a lot.
Yeah. we most certainly have. So When Helping Hurts, 2009, you co-authored When Helping Hurts. Clearly had a major impact on churches and organizations, how they approach poverty. What are some of the central claims that you make in that, in terms of how folks approach helping the poor, mission trips? Talk about that a little bit for our listeners.
The whole thing. Yeah. So, oftentimes when I'm talking to audiences, I will ask them the following question. Imagine that you're trying to figure out which organization to write a check to. So you're trying to figure out which ministries help the poor in most effective ways, and you're trying to figure out who to write a check to. What are some questions that you would like to have answered before you write a check? And usually the audience says something like this. They want to know how much goes to overhead. And David, that's your salary, buddy. That's my salary. They always want to know how much is going to overhead. And they'll talk about efficiency. They'll talk about various kinds of things. But fundamentally, I think we have to ask the following question. What is poverty? What is it? And it's interesting because most Americans, if you ask them what poverty is, they'll say something like this. Poverty is about a lack of food, a lack of clothing, a lack of housing. We tend to define poverty as a lack of some material thing. But if you ask poor people all across America and all around the world, what is poverty? They'll say things like this. I feel shame. I feel less than human. I feel disrespected. I feel like garbage that people want to get rid of. People in poverty tend to describe their situation in more psychological and social and even spiritual terms. We tend to define poverty in material terms. And that disconnect really is at the core of the problem. And so it's like we're addressing a problem that's different from the problem that they're actually experiencing. And so certainly people who are poor are lacking in clothing and shelter and food and all of that. That's typically a symptom of something deeper. And it's that deeper thing that we've got to get at.
You talk about in the book about, helping folks in the short term can actually do damage.
Yeah.
As opposed to being in it for the long term. Yeah. Really being, and talk about that. What do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of folks, I myself, on mission trips, and I want to talk about that a little bit in more depth, because I have some observations from some trips that I've made and real eye openers during COVID. But talk a little bit. How is it that you can actually do damage?
Yeah. Well, it really comes down to the answer to the question, what is poverty? And so what my co-author and I try to do is to root our understanding of poverty in the biblical story. And the biblical story starts with this idea that God creates human beings in his image, right? And what does that mean to be in the image of God? Well, it means a couple of things, but one of the things it means is this. From all eternity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost exist in deep communion with one another. God is inherently a relational being. From all eternity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are loving each other. They're in deep community. And as beings made in God's image, we are hardwired for relationship as well. So it really comes down to, what is a human being? Mm-hmm. And most of us think of the human being as a physical creature. It's the problem of Western civilization. We think of people as physical creatures. Economists are all over this. And then some people, a lot of Christians would say, well, the human being is a body that contains a soul. Well, I think there's truth in that, but I think there's more. I think what the Bible is actually saying is the human being is a highly integrated body, soul, relational thingy. And so we're not just bodies. We're not just bodies that contain souls. We're a highly integrated body, soul, relational thingies. And we're created for a relationship with God, with ourselves, with others, and with creation. And so what is this good for? This isn't just a bunch of theology. Just hang in there with me for a second. What happens in the fall, what happens when humanity sins, is that all of those relationships are broken. We see this in the Bible. Human beings' relationship with God is severed. They're cast out of the Garden of Eden. And immediately we see a distortion in all of their relationships. Relationship with self, a relationship that should be one of dignity and worth, it becomes a relationship that says, you know what, I'm ashamed of myself. Adam and Eve try to cover themselves. Relationship with others. Adam and Eve start to have conflict. Relationship with creation. Adam is told thorns will infest the ground. Eve is told to be pains in childbearing. Broken relationships are at the heart of the human condition. And so that shows up in the space of poverty. Think about the relationship with self. What research has shown is that most people who are materially poor around the world, people are lacking in food, shelter, and clothing. Their broken relationship with themselves is what we might call a marred identity. They have a sense of shame, a sense of inferiority, a sense of incapacity, a sense that they're not able to affect change in their lives. Well, the problem for the rest of us who are not materially poor is that we also have a broken relationship with ourselves, but it's the inverse of that one. It's pride. It's a sense of superiority. It's a sense that somehow I'm better than that homeless person. And some researchers would call this a God complex. We think that we're better and that we're uniquely anointed to fix poor people. So now you've got a dynamic. You've got people with a sense of inferiority interacting with people with a sense of superiority. That's the basic dynamic. That's a lot of background to your question. Now, we go on a short-term trip, what do? Well, we hurl resources around. We act like we're the saviors. We act like poor people need us to fix them. And that dynamic can exacerbate, can make worse the sense of inferiority. It can make worse the sense of shame. And what happens is people actually become more passive as a result. Oh, I knew I couldn't make change in my life. I knew I couldn't do anything. I needed all these Americans to come and fix me. And so they become more passive. And as that happens, we get more frustrated. I knew they were good for nothing. I knew they weren't as thrifty as I am. I knew that they didn't work as hard as I do. And so their shame is enhanced and our pride is enhanced. And both parties are worse off at the end of the day. That's how you can do harm on a short-term trip.
Yeah, and I know, and I've seen you speak before, and in your book, I mean, you're not saying don't do that.
No.
You're saying do more, but right? That's what I've heard you say. You don't want to tell people not to do that because that is counter to what you're saying. Well, you want people to do more.
So I don't want people to do what they're doing. I want people to do more than ever before, but do it differently.
Right.
So sometimes people think that what we're saying is stop trying to help poor people. That's not the message.
Right.
The message is helping poor people takes far more than we ever imagined. And so whatever you're doing, you should quadruple it, but do it differently. It's not about running around and hurling around resources. It's about walking together across time and saying, you know what? I'm broken and you're broken. We're both broken, but Jesus can fix both of us and he's the solution for us. And so it's not less, it's more, but it's different.
It's different, right? You know, it's interesting. You talk, and a couple things I want to touch on. You talk about the relational nature of us as creation. You're an economist. I'm an accountant. Spent 37 years as a CPA. Retired.
We're in trouble, buddy. We are in trouble.
I'm a recovering auditor, and so I was retired, trying to think about what to do, and the opportunity at St. Vincent de Paul came up, and so that's a good thing to do. I'm going to do that, and so I joined the team over at St. Vincent de Paul. Spent a very intense 3 years learning things, Brian, that I had never. Seeing things that I had never seen before in a community that I'd lived for 40 years.
Totally
shocking. Almost traumatic to an extent of saying, how did I not see the need in the community?
Yep.
And so I'd recently written an op-ed that got covered in the local Catholic newspaper about the 5 things that I learned. And one of those things that I learned is that clearly people do not want to be on the street. And the reasons why we think they're on the street are oftentimes not the reason they're on the street, especially when you get to know them at a human level. And in many cases, the folks that we've helped to get to a place of being able to be self-sustainable and housed again was that they were suffering from a number of physical things. But what they were really suffering from the most was relational poverty.
That's it.
Somehow, somewhere, something happened that created a situation in which they found themselves homeless, and they did not have the relationships to keep them from being homeless. And we all have family members. Well, I shouldn't say we all have family members, but many of us have family members or friends or people in our close circle that suffer from addiction, that suffer from mental illness, that have issues, but they're not homeless.
That's it.
Does that resonate with?
Oh, dude, that's it. That's the whole thing. So when I was a little kid, my dad said to me, Brian, don't ever drink alcohol. And I said, why? He said, you're an alcoholic waiting to happen. And that was a hard thing to hear from my father, and I was a little boy. And I said, what do you mean? He said, Brian, you're such a perfectionist. You're such an idealist. He said, you're going to have a hard time dealing with the imperfections in life.
Wow.
And alcohol is going to be a temptation to you. Well, in God's grace, I'm actually allergic to alcohol. I can't drink it. But Dad was right. And when I talk to people who are homeless, so often they're just me. They are often driven people, type A personalities, many of them perfectionists, and something went wrong and they couldn't cope with it. And they turned to alcohol or drugs to deaden the pain. And then that led to all kinds of broken relationships. And they don't know how to get back into a relational framework because they've, so many things are broken. But it's totally what you're talking about. They're me.
Yeah.
They are me.
Yeah. I get it. And I, and a number of the folks, again, you see time and time again, individuals that have been able to deal with that. And at St. Vincent de Paul, we provide all sorts of housing and feeding, but it's also about that wraparound, that help, that case management, that relationship to help folks see what's possible. But without the opportunity to come into the shelter, they don't have the opportunity to think and settle down. They're on the street. They're thinking about what it is to survive, because many of the folks that come to us, if they don't get off the street, they will die.
Yep.
And so the opportunity that we provide is that pause, that safety, that security, to be able to start to think about what might be next, providing wraparound, all those.
Love it. I love what you're saying. Everything makes sense to me. My daughter who works in this space, she said to me the other day, she said, Dad, poverty alleviation is about providing some kind of service or ministry that buys you time to develop relationships. She said, because the relationships are the real thing, but it's hard to sell relationships. It's hard to say, look, we're going to be friends to somebody who's, homeless, right? And so she said, the deal is you got to figure out a way to buy time. And that's what you're describing. And it's ultimately those wraparound services that are going to be the key thing. But as you know better than I do, it's very difficult with people who are homeless to develop the trust to get them to be willing to come inside and to hang out with you. It takes a long time. It's a long process. And so what you're doing is extremely difficult, but you got the right thing.
Well, and Brian, even now that I'm retired from St. Vincent de Paul, and the new leadership is doing amazing work, expanding our help to folks in need in Louisville, Kentucky, and you'll find this across the United States. There is a lack of shelter space, and so for many that want to get that respite, that time, that pause, there's no place to go.
Yep.
And so we're about, I would say, in the city of Louisville, let me just throw a number out, 750 beds short, something like that, at any given night. And it's not the long-term answer. I mean, it's not, but it is that transitional answer to allow for that time to get to a point of sustainability.
That's it. The hardest thing, and I don't know who's listening, David, I don't know much about your particular ministry. I don't know much about your financial supporters, but sometimes what people hear when they hear me talking or they read When Helping Hurts, they hear me saying, we don't need money, we need relationship. Well, I agree that we need that people who are in poverty, all of us need relationship. But you know what? Relationships aren't free. What we need are financial supporters to give bigger checks for relationship building. It's really easy to raise money for physical infrastructure.
Right.
It's tangible. The donor can see it. I'm going to pay for more beds. I'm going to pay for a shelter. I'm going to pay for meals. It's easy to get money for that. What's hard to do is to raise money for hanging out with people and developing long-term relationships that are empowering. It's hard to measure the thing. But that's so our message is write bigger checks, but write them to pay for the relational component even more than you ever have before.
I want to say one last thing about that, because I want to get back to When Helping Hurts.
That's all right.
And the Chalmers Center, the work that you're doing, as well as Becoming Whole. One of the things that we did when I was there, and it was, one of the things I learned as a leader is surround yourself by really smart people and get out of the way
Yeah.
and let them do their thing.
Yeah.
And the idea by the team was to create a 24/7 shelter, which means no check-in, no check-out. The vast
Wow.
majority of shelters around the country, you got to check out in the morning.
Okay.
Where do you go? Well, you go
Yeah.
to McDonald's, you go to the library, you go to the
Right.
street.
Right.
So we created so what you're talking about is opportunities for more relationship.
That's it.
It's 24/7. We had a number of the folks that were in there that were able to get night shift jobs because they had a place to go during the day. They could earn more money. So there's that notion of folks that, well, there's a lot of myths that surround it, but that kind of an idea is an amazing idea. It's working, but it costs money.
It's very expensive.
And you have to have the funds. I mean,
You do.
It can sound crass, but it is what it is. You need to have the funds. And even with that, the 24/7 shelter, the organization is probably spending about $38 a night. It's a lot cheaper than the emergency room. It's a lot cheaper than jail. It's a lot cheaper than the social cost, all those things. It's very doable. And to me, I'm convinced. I mean, I'm a perfectionist, a numbers guy. And so we're getting more support for that. And I think it's in line with your thinking and when helping hurts. And so it's how many years later? 20 years since when was it? 2009. 2009. You're getting 15, 16 years.
Yeah.
What's changed in that time frame and the work that you're doing with folks and how they approach the work of alleviating poverty?
Yeah. So, I think there's both good news and bad news. People sort of like to interpret what you've written in the way they want to hear it. And so some folks have read When Helping Hurts and said, I'm going to pull back. I'm not going to do anything at all. I'm going to stop trying to help. And, maybe they didn't really feel like helping to begin with. That was never our message. Our message has always been do more, but do it differently. So the negative is some people pull back. And quite frankly, I think our country right now is struggling with the ideas of compassion and reaching out and loving people. And so I'm very discouraged by that. On the other hand, I do think we are seeing another group that's growing in their understanding of the relational nature of poverty, and they are adjusting how they're approaching things. And I'm very encouraged to see that. And, we're starting to see people who are saying, you know what, it's about community. It's about this being with people. It's about just hanging out and creating that safety and the security that you were talking about earlier, David. And so I'm seeing that as well. I'm seeing greater awareness of issues of trauma and mental health issues. And economists don't have any framework for even thinking about that. The way that economists think about a human being doesn't even create the space for thinking about trauma. But trauma is so much of what we got to be dealing with, right? And so I think we're starting to grow on our understandings of trauma and the long-term impacts that can have. And so and that's all related to relationship as well. And so I think we're seeing growth in those areas. But I'm also very concerned about a loss of compassion. And what, I don't know exactly who your constituency is right now, David, but it's just, we're losing compassion.
Well, it's interesting. With the experience that I've had over the last 3 years, people will say, well, how did it go? What's going on? What are you doing? And all that. And I'll start talking about what I've seen, because you can't unsee what you see.
Right.
You travel the world. You've gone into the slums, the barrios. You've
whole
seen,
thing.
You can't unsee that. Okay. And so this notion of empathy and building empathy, true compassion and empathy, is a really hard, and I believe as a society, we're not healthy unless we are able to embrace that. And we can do all the things we want to do, but if you don't actually from the gut feel some sense of empathy, and I think in 1 John 3:17, If anyone has material possessions and sees their brother but does not have pity, how is the love of God inside of you? And so for me, I'm not trying to beat myself up and flagellate, and, but the reality is, until in our communities we can build that sense of empathy and understanding, it's hard for policy to follow that.
Totally. You
right?
got it. Totally. It's so. I was speaking somewhere recently, and I was kind of trying to make the case that that sometimes people with financial resources can do a lot of harm in how they work with the poor, and was trying to discourage them, sort of the audience, from thinking that they could develop relationships with the poor and so on. And because I didn't think they could. And a gentleman came up to me afterwards and he said, Brian, I know what you're critiquing. You're critiquing the sort of run in, do something quick and leave. He said, I accept the critique. But he said, you know what? Every person needs one messy relationship in their life. And, I thought, that's it. That's it. We all need at least one messy relationship, because we need to understand what people are experiencing. We need to develop empathy, exactly as you're describing. And that, I have a relationship with a friend who's homeless, and he's become my friend. And boy, it's messy. But the Lord uses him to remind me of who I really am. I'm a broken person like everybody else. And it's interesting. In my family, there's some obsessive compulsive disorder as part of the kind of the family dynamic, and I struggle with it a little bit. And God brought me a friend who's homeless who also has OCD, and it turns out we were born on the same day.
Oh my God!
And so it's just like the craziest story. Yeah. And so God brought me somebody who's me, with a different set of life's experiences.
Oh my gosh.
And so and he teaches me things. He teaches me things that are wrong with me. And so we all need one messy relationship, and it helps us develop the empathy you're describing.
Your spiritual twin.
Yeah. Yeah, really. He really is. And he watches my life, and I'm so busy. And he'll say to me, Brian, I don't want to be like you. I said, why? He said, listen, you're completely screwed up. He said, who wants to be like you? He said, you're running around doing all this stuff. He said, when do you have time for people? And so here's this guy who's homeless, who's speaking into my life, and he's speaking truth.
What amazing.
And he is the poor guy is so messed up. But he's looking at me saying, Like one day he was staying at my house, and my wife was gone for the weekend. And I came down for breakfast, and he's got a note on the kitchen table, and it says, you need to buy Jill a dozen roses and put them right here. And he had an arrow for where I was supposed to place the dozen roses. And he said, your wife is gone, but when she comes back, you need to welcome her in the house. You need to love on her. And so he's coaching me in my marriage. And you know what? He was totally right.
That's wonderful. I wanted to get back to this notion of community and relationships. You talk a lot about it in the book, about the resources in the community, utilizing them. They're already there. Use them. And I have a story on that, and I would love for you to expound on that. And there's this economic approach to alleviating poverty, asset-based community development. And I want you to explain kind of what that means. And I had an experience, and have had ongoing experience with that in Belize. There was a ministry in Louisville, a wonderful ministry, that's been doing wonderful work in Belize, in Nicaragua, for years and years and years. And they utilize, there's things that they've learned over time in terms of how they approach the trips and all that kind of stuff. But they have teams of people in Belize that are there to make sure that we're educated on
Yeah,
what
yeah.
we're doing. But I had an experience, Brian, during COVID in Belize. The country was closed. Our country was closed. And the minute that it reopened, I was honored to be asked to go down to Belize, kind of as a guinea pig, to get through customs, to do all the things that we
Yeah,
needed.
yeah.
And they never stopped their ministry, which is many faceted. But one of the things that they'll do is kind of like a Habitat for Humanity, build homes, and the folks that are there that are the recipient of that have skin in the game and build other people's homes and do all kinds of things. Long story short, I get into the country, and I'm the only person there, so it's not a typical trip. I'm the only person there. And so I'm part of the team. I wish I spoke Spanish, but I was part of the team. I'm there, and I came to realize that here's a country that really, from the perspective of wealth, when you compare it to the United States, I mean, there's no comparison. And their real only industry of any sort is the cruise lines come in and vacations and all that kind of stuff. And they just leave, and they really don't provide any kind of sustainable wealth.
Right.
But the resiliency of the people, they were in much better shape during COVID than we were. They used the resources they had. And I don't know if it's just an element of expectation and understanding of where you're at. Here everyone's woe is me kind of thing.
Right.
And it was just an amazing thing to experience when I was there, to see the resiliency. They never stopped building houses. They never stopped doing the things that they were doing. And they have also a group of women that have received homes, that are now raising money and doing things in the community to build homes for other people. And they're doing it all with the resources that they have, kind of thing. And they're making a difference. They're getting people a roof over their head. So that they can be more self-sustainable. Talk to that in terms of your experience and what you've seen that works, and how nonprofits can kind of shift to that mentality of recognizing that there's resources where these folks are. It's a long-winded question, but it really resonates with me what you say. That sense of self-sufficiency and that sense of dignity that comes with that kind of approach.
It's terrific. So at the start of our conversation here, I asked you the question, what is poverty? And I said, basically, poverty is rooted in broken relationships. Well, now let's reverse the question. What is unpoverty? What does it mean to not be in poverty? Well, another way of saying that, what does human flourishing look like? And what does it mean to flourish? And I think that we get from the Bible is, again, this idea that we are wired for relationship with God, self, others, and creation. What does that mean? Well, it means that we have a sense of dignity, a sense of capacity, and that we're stewarding our gifts and our resources. That's in relationship to creation. We're stewarding our gifts and our resources for what purpose? Well, it's not to get rich. It's not to live the American dream. The whole point is to image God. And so we are to use our gifts and our resources to serve others. It's about service. And so it's so interesting. I'm an economist. When we try to measure human flourishing, we look at has household consumption gone up? Well, if that's the measure, then America is flourishing like crazy because household consumption is really high. But the truth of the matter is, anxiety and depression in America right now are off the charts. So apparently this measure is the wrong measure. Well, maybe the measure ought to be not consumption, but giving. Maybe the measure ought to be, how much am I using my gifts and abilities to serve others? So maybe it's giving is the measure, right? So, well, how do you get there? Well, it's about using an asset-based approach. Instead of saying to a person, what's wrong with you? How can I fix you? That's a needs-based approach. An asset-based approach says, what do you have? What gifts and resources has God given you? What talents has God given you? That doesn't sound like much, but a lot of poor people have been downtrodden. They might be from the wrong tribe or the wrong gender or the wrong whatever. And so for centuries, they've been told they're less than human. They're the scum of the earth. And that starts to get internalized. When you've got people telling you that because you're from this tribe or this people group or this color of skin, for centuries, the message has been you are by birth less than human. That becomes part of the psyche. That's not just something, that's not just an external message. That message is internalized. But when you say to a person like that, what gifts and abilities do you have? The question can be empowering. The question, just asking somebody, what are you good at? And then oftentimes they'll go, well, I don't really think I'm good at anything. But then what you can do is if they're in a group, get the other group members to start saying, oh no, Susie, you're good at this. We've seen you cook. When you start to have a community of people cheering for the person, saying, I've seen this in you. I've seen this gift in you. Susie's going to start to sit up a little straighter. She's going to start to say, maybe I can do something. Maybe I am somebody. And then what gifts do you have? Well, you know what? I can cook. Okay, Susie, that's great. So how are you using your cooking skills? Well, I'm not really using them. Well, why not? Well, I know how to cook, but I don't know how to create a business. Oh, what if we came around side of you and helped you with a business model? You would do that for me? Yeah, we can help you with that. And so it's coming alongside. It doesn't mean you don't do anything to help. It means starting with the goods, starting with the gifts, starting with what Susie's got, and then figuring out how you can complement that with resources she doesn't have to unleash her. It's a completely different approach.
It is a completely different approach, and it's an approach that takes more discipline and more time.
More discipline,
right?
More time. Yep, and that's what we don't have. Is it it's the time? We don't have time
because we have the financial resource. We have the financial resources. So last weekend was the Kentucky Derby. Mm-hmm. It's a wonderful spectacle, a wonderful event, beautiful, all that kind of stuff. But I got to tell you, when you sit there, and my brother came and his wife came to visit and go to the Derby, and I was telling my brother, I said, watch the tote board when the Derby race is about an hour before the Derby race. Okay. And this is not a criticism. This is not anything else. And I think I might write a little essay on this because where your heart is, your focus, your time, your resources, your energy will go, right? It's easy for me to say that. It's harder sometimes to live that out. But when you see the level of abundance just on a tote board, tens of millions, I'm saying tens of millions of dollars being bet on a 2-minute race in the track, not online, not in Vegas, in the track with people that, so at that moment, everyone's heart is on that 2 minutes. And again, it's a wonderful event every year in Louisville, all that kind of stuff. Yep. But when you step back from it and look at that, then you got to step back and say, there is no excuse. And that's why when I was talking about that trip that I took to Belize during COVID, there is no excuse. When you see the resiliency and the utilization of lack of resources to get things done, and the beauty in that and the hard work, and then you come back here and to your point, you start to see, oh, woe is me, and I'm so depressed, and I'm so anxious, and I'm this, and I'm that. I can't do this. There's really no excuse. Mm-hmm. And it's even become even more for me a thing after spending the time with St. Vincent and continuing to spend time with St. Vincent de Paul. There's no excuse in our community to have folks on the street. Doesn't have to happen. Doesn't need to happen, kind of thing. And so, the whole notion of abundance and economics and and all that. One thing I know we got to wrap up. I've taken up so much of your time.
No, I've enjoyed speaking with you. This is so
in a lot of countries, there's a lack of rule of law. What, in your experience, what impact does that have on the work?
Oh my word!
Right? I'm sure we can make a whole separate conversation on
Huge.
what does the rule of law mean to poverty,
Oh my word!
or the lack of rule of law.
Oh my word! Well, so many levels. People who are in poverty are highly vulnerable. They are people who are easy to prey on. They are people who are easy to take advantage of. They are people who are easy to exploit. And we see this all over the world. And what we need is a rule of law, laws that protect the vulnerable. And so, oh my word, you want to protect the vulnerable, you've got to have a rule of law that respects life, no matter what. It respects life from the moment of conception all the way through death. Without a rule of law, the vulnerable always get abused. That's one piece. The second piece of it is, I think we've made an idol out of economic growth and prosperity, and I think it's killing us. The truth is, poor people do need functioning economies. Poor people need job creation. Poor people need business people to start businesses. And you're not going to start a business if there's not a sound rule of law. And if you want an investment in a country, you want growth in a country, you've got to have a stable legal order so that the investor can say, I know I'm going to be able, this is my property, I'm going to own it. And I'm going to get a return from it. If you lose that, investment goes in the tank, the economy plummets. Rule of law is really fundamental to alleviating poverty.
Yeah.
And so we've got to protect the rule of law in this nation.
Right.
And we've got to protect the institution. We have to take care of our institutions, and we're not right now.
I agree. And, because without it, it's chaos.
It's chaos.
It's chaos. So, becoming whole, coming after, coming after when helping hurts. You already talked about trauma, and this is going to be, I want to wrap up here, but you talk about trauma, and it's a real thing. And also, I have to say, and something that folks don't talk about enough, for those that are dedicated to helping others, there's secondary trauma as well. You can't help but, if you're really doing the work, you can't help but not absorb. And others can absorb it. Others can, not, kind of thing. I'm one of those that has difficulty absorbing that.
Yep.
I do. What I'm saying is I internalize it.
Yep.
Maybe too much, and it has
You're
too
an
much of
accountant.
an impact. But we need to write more about that as well for folks that are out there doing the work. But you talk about demonic forces. And I honestly do believe that when we're going down a certain path at St. Vincent de Paul, that there were forces that were working against us. Clearly. And I think that you've acknowledged that in becoming whole.
Yeah.
It's a real thing.
Yeah, it's a real thing. It's interesting. When I was first in this line of work, somebody mentioned demonic forces to me, and I just thought, person's a wacko. What are they talking about? But you know what? The Bible talks about demonic forces all the time. The Bible says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against the principalities and powers in the heavenly realms. And so we should expect demonic forces to be opposing our work. They're opposed to the work of God, and they're opposed to his image bearers. I think demons love it when they see people who are homeless. And so that affects how we design our ministries. And we need prayer. We need to rely on prayer. We need God to protect us from demonic forces. It's a big part of the design of an effective ministry. Yeah, your brother. Because we're a little short on time, but I'll just tell you this: So becoming whole kind of builds on when helping hurts and goes deeper. When I speak about becoming whole anywhere, it's the Catholics in the audience who come up to me afterwards and say, "This is exactly what we believe."
Yeah.
And as a Protestant, it kind of rattles me a little bit. But I actually believe the sacraments. I believe that baptism and the Lord's Supper are part of poverty alleviation. So I believe some weird stuff. But I actually think that Roman Catholic social thought is way ahead of where most Protestants are. And people who are Catholics who read Becoming Whole go, "That's what we believe. That's us."
Well, as we're recording this, the cardinals are meeting in
That's right.
conclave, choosing the next pope. So
That's
hopefully
right.
the successor to St. Francis will have the same sense of social justice
Yep.
that
Yep.
he had, because I think it's a position that does have influence either way.
Totally.
So the Chalmers Center for Economic Development will wrap up with this chalmers.org,
Yeah.
right? It's where folks
Yep.
can go.
Yep.
There's lots of resources for nonprofits to help make that shift to approach and better understand needs, as opposed to coming with what they believe to be the answers are, right? That's
it.
What would you tell a nonprofit that's looking to kind of shift, or church organization, whatever it may be, to kind of shift from that, I guess, paternalistic approach to one that's more about understanding?
That's right. So if you go to our website, you'll see all kinds of resources there. Some of them are books, but there's also training courses and so on. A lot of the things that are there are derivative products of When Helping Hurts. So, for example, there's something called Helping Without Hurting, the small group experience. And so it's basically, it's for a small group, for a Bible study or some kind of midweek gathering or something, and short lessons with videos that you can use to facilitate. And so a lot of the stuff there is just taking the ideas of When Helping Hurts and putting them into more bite-sized pieces and usable pieces. There's a bunch of stuff there. There's a book and a course called Helping Without Hurting in Church Benevolence. I'm not sure what in the Catholic tradition, I'm not quite sure what the language would be, but when a person walks into your church who's homeless or asking for help with their electric bill, what do you do in that moment? We've got a whole course on that. Yeah. There's another course called Innovate, which basically helps you to redesign your existing ministries or launch new ones in ways that are more consistent with an asset-based image-bearing approach. So there's all kinds of stuff there.
Thank you so much for the time that you've taken with me. You're truly a blessing and making such an impact on so many all across the world.
David, thanks so much. It's been a joy to be with you. And I've never had the chance to visit your ministry, but maybe someday in the future I can stop by and see your work. I've been in Louisville a few times. It's a great city. And,
I would love for you to do that. Maybe we can try to catch up offline.
That'd be so great, brother. Take care.
Thank you.